As a child, I fostered a colossal misconception, believing that somewhere in the United States resides an enormous wooden box to trap sunlight. And for me, that misconception defined daylight savings as the day we opened and closed the giant energy-saving box. Much like growing up, the 21st century sheds new light on old concepts. We live in a time of endless possibilities in which science questions ethics, and we continue to challenge the discoveries of our predecessors in what we call our increasingly global world. That's an abstract thought, isn't it? When I hear the words increasingly global world, I always imagine the Earth shrinking in a little and concaving, folding in on itself along the lines of the tectonic plates, as if the continents were holding hands. But realistically, the continents are surely not holding hands. As a result of this global world, our societies and governments face issues and experiences that are new to us, such as the shift in technology changing the shape of war. We no longer see two armies marching towards each other in perfect lines. Today, these conflicts are overwhelmingly complex, as modern weapons allow a tremendous amount of power. A single decision, an act so small as the push of a button, could wipe out an entire city. And as we struggle through these issues, gaining experience over time, we all too often reach the same conclusion, that this will have to be just another one for the next generation. And in truth, it all does fall to the students, armed with the lessons that society will learn between now and when my generation takes office. We will battle future energy crises, assure peace, and navigate diplomatic discrepancies. We will be the ones picking apart the loose ends of conflicts with long overdue solutions and patching up the rough stitching at the tangled seams of our societies. The weight of the world is resting on the shoulders of those who carry the unreasonably heavy backpacks. So logically, society would invest in the education of our youth. Now, I am not the first to come to this decision. Society has long placed importance on preparing the younger generation to not only handle, but also solve tomorrow's issues. So perhaps in our democratic republic, the purpose of education is to produce active, employable citizens with the capability to maintain a functional nation. In which case, the purpose of public education is to produce a generation of active, employable citizens, each given the same opportunity of education. Now, this requires some coordination and structure. In post-industrial revolution America, students across the country were studying a vast variety of subjects. While some viewed secondary school as a college preparatory institution, others considered it a place to learn practical expertise and trades. Furthermore, there was an inconsistency among the emphasis in topics studied. So, in 1891, the National Education Association appointed the Committee on Secondary School Studies, chaired by Charles Eliot, then president of Harvard University, to straighten out this ragtag education system. These 10 educators, often called the Committee of 10, simplified the programs. They decided to set forth a standard curriculum in which every subject will be taught equally so long as a student chose to pursue it. Thereby, more time would not be spent teaching mathematics than teaching history. Furthermore, the same set of potential courses would be offered to high school students regardless of whether they planned to pursue post-secondary education. We still see these ideals in our schools today, as state initiatives aim to create curriculum uniformity to offer all students the same preparation for success after graduation. This idea mirrors much of what the Committee of 10 stood for. But in efforts to be fair and equal, standards have evolved to create an industrialized education system, both in public and private sectors. Students proceed from one required course to another, collecting grades on transcripts like stamps of approval on factory products. During secondary school years, students begin to prepare for their futures. Especially if pursuing post-secondary education, This process typically includes evaluation of grade point averages, standardized test scores, class rankings, and further figures that transform today's living, breathing youth into a set of numbers that supposedly define their capabilities. These assessments greatly influence the students' options upon graduation, and therefore carry much weight and importance. But students invest so much time resenting the assignment of these numbers and striving for those perfect scores that they don't recognize the process by which they become their numbers. When applying to colleges, students are asked to submit essays to provide admissions officers with a better perspective on who the student is as a thinker, a writer, and as a person. This is a chance for the students to show that they are more than just their numbers. This is also the experience that demonstrates to many high school seniors that they have not learned how to climb outside of the box that education has created for them. They may be able to think outside of the box, but physically that action excludes any sort of progressive movement. In classes, students are given rubrics and grading systems for each assignment, each essay. But these admissions essay prompts deliberately provide very little guidance in order to allow self-expression and encourage students to show their creative skills. But so many top-notch students lack this creative essence because it was never a grade on the report card. Thereby, this framework of our education system diminishes creativity rather than developing it as a skill. Gone are the days when perhaps in our minds, a wooden box could contain sunlight. Our increasingly competitive world demands so much from us that in order to survive the workload, we have to beat the system. At this point in our education, we have perfected the art of manufacturing. Balancing extracurricular activities, advanced classes, volunteer work, supplementary courses, we can navigate our brains to store information in the neatly lined shelves and drawers just long enough to get the grade and move on with our lives. In this way, the focus is pulled away from the actual act of teaching and learning, away from the applicable content and onto the grade. But grades don't portray how much a student has learned. A B- may mean a student didn't apply himself, but it is equally likely that this grade indicates that the student struggled with the coursework, although he committed to his studies wholeheartedly. And don't think students haven't caught on to this ambiguity open to interpretation. In the classroom, the question quickly becomes, how will this affect my grade? Rather than, how can I use this? How does this apply to the world outside of my textbook? Personally, the only times I have heard anyone say, how can I use this in a classroom, were in efforts to invalidate the importance of what we were learning, because the board was covered in numbers and letters that were so confusing it seemed impossible to decipher, let alone regenerate or even understand. And in these ways, the schools we perceive as places to grow become factories designed to produce students of only one kind, the kind that graduate. Studying for the grade and not for the experience, the student body assumes a mundane act of sloughing through school. So let's put this back into context. Today, ideas that once seemed impossible fantasies of science fiction novelists are now commonplace. We are preparing our students for a world that has not been invented yet, to be able to answer questions that we have not asked yet. But progress requires innovation, and innovation requires creativity. And finally, creativity is nowhere in the formula for a high school graduation. How can we expect forward thinkers if the construct of our education de-emphasizes exploration and creativity? We must shift our attention away from the grades and on to the process of learning by stressing the importance of creativity, questioning, and exploration. Models that dampen the role of grades already exist. Many American high schools, colleges, and universities replace standard numerical marking systems with narrative evaluations, in which teachers describe a student's development in words rather than numbers. These schools include Brown University and Yale Law School. Even more universities allow students to take courses on a pass-fail basis, allowing students the opportunity to explore topics and build strength in subjects that they otherwise wouldn't consider out of fear of damaging their precious GPA. But perhaps there's more we can do. Let's consult the Committee of 10, shall we? Aside from creating an early education system, the Committee of 10 emphasized the importance of highly trained teachers in primary and secondary education. We seem to be diverging from this suggestion, for today online learning is quickly replacing classroom education. This is simply because teachers are undervalued in our society. A teacher does not simply deliver content mandated by standardized decisions. A teacher instructs their students, provides guidance, allowing their students to grow and create and nurture creativity and develop the critical thinking skills they will need to solve the global issues of tomorrow. The influence of teachers is what makes an education specialized, engaging, and enlightening. Although content can be accessed online, the interpersonal interactions and the human experience of learning from a teacher cannot be. For example, it would be quite challenging to learn to write if a computer was processing and grading all of your essays. So as we challenge our one-size-fits-all curriculum, we can do something small in our own lives. We can alter the perspective with which we regard our teachers. Educators greatly influence the lives of their students, regardless of what we think of them. Every day they introduce us to new concepts and challenge us. They alter our perspective, and if nothing else, that is deserving of respect. But this devaluing construct extends past the walls of high schools. A kindergarten teacher is rarely granted the caliber of respect with which we regard university professors. Why? Early educators have an arguably greater influence on their students. Everything from critical thinking skills to study habits can be traced back to elementary school teachers. These educators set the foundation on which students will be building for the rest of their lives. We must recognize that teachers are more than just vehicles of standardized information, and that grades don't portray the depth of a student's intellect. If we are to continue moving forward in our innovative world, we must shift our emphasis to be on the content, the learning process, and the teachers, not the grade. A book once written is static. In a world that is far from a standstill, our teachers, not our textbooks, are the driving force of our education. Thank you.